Welcome to the Story of the Week podcast, which is the supplemental podcast to the supplemental podcast that supplements our daily newscast from the Conversation Project. That's called Things You Might Have Heard. Every 5:50 a.m. every morning, Monday through Friday, weekday mornings, we provide for you a rundown of some of the top stories from the past weekend or day as it stands. From there, we take all the stories from the week and put them in the weekly wrap-up podcast, which gives you the top 10 stories, plus some stories that didn't quite make it in, to tell you what stories per the numbers directly that were the top 10 stories. The daily podcast and videocast gives you a wide range from a big group of stories to pick from. This podcast, or the podcast previous, gives you the exact top 10 stories based on pure data. From there, we get a chance to kind of go off the beaten path and expand on one of those stories in the Story of the Week. That's what this podcast provides. And so we will pick one of those stories. We'll explain that in just a moment. Right now, I want to remind you that you can find all the details of everything I've said at our website. This is theconversationproject.com for replays of all those podcasts, plus places to find all the materials and more behind the scenes things there. We don't do a lot of sales stuff here, a lot of promotion stuff, but you can go to the website and see our sponsors and visit our partnerships page and see how that goes there. So for this podcast here, we took the top 10 stories of this week. This is for the week that ends on the 24th of June, 2023. Our top 10 stories, and we picked one of those stories. We whittled them down one by one, basically comparing them one at a time to see which story seemed stronger, or essentially which story I was more keen to talking about. The top 10 stories for this week include these, in order from 1 to 10. The pilot and four passengers of the Titan submersible are dead, U.S. Coast Guard says. Story number 1. Number 2, at least 20 people shot, one fatally at Juneteenth celebration near Chicago. For number 3, Marjorie Taylor Greene calls Lauren Boebert a little bitch on the House floor. Got to say little bitch a lot this week. At number 4, Tesla stock sinks as Barclays says it's time to, quote, move to the sidelines. Number 5, Moms of Liberty's Hamilton County chapter quotes Hitler in first newsletter. At number 6, pop star, catcher, and producer Dr. Luke settle long-standing legal battle over rape, defamation claims. Number 7, Hawaii volcano stops erupting, putting an end to stunning lava show. At number 8, YouTube TV testing non-sport multi-view streams. At number 9, Elon Musk tweet challenges Mark Zuckerberg to a fight. And the 10th story this week was Geraldo Rivera says he will exit Fox News' The Five. Just for contrast, the story that no one cared about, we call it the almost irrelevant story of the week. It was story 204, at the very bottom of the listing for this week. The headline for that one read as such: Justice Department accuses Minneapolis police of rights violations after George Floyd's killing. Now, that one should have caught more attention. We're not sure why, but it did not. And so we're not talking about it here or much at all. We are talking about the story that was actually chosen to be the story of the week. And of all the stories out there, it was a very interesting one. It almost was Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, because I guess I just enjoy saying little bitch a lot. But turns out that it whittled down to Moms for Liberty's Hamilton County chapter quotes Hitler in first newsletter. So we're going to go deeper into that story right now, and why it's a bigger story than just one group that apparently are extremists that people don't want to believe are extremists, who are, and why you might need to check your list of friends and allies out there who you believe in and work with on the outskirts of stuff, because what they're saying may not be exactly what you want to be saying. So let's get into that right now. Starting off with the larger scope of this, as Moms of Liberty, or Moms for Liberty, I should say, the national co-founders, Tiffany Justice and Tina Dakovich, spoke out recently about the Southern Poverty Law Center's report that labeled them as an extremist group in its annual report that came out about a month ago. And that's basically what it is. Southern Poverty Law Center has been doing this stuff since back in the Dr. King times, talking about what groups are extremist groups, what groups are bad for America, what groups are bad for specific people, marginalized specifically. And they're saying that Moms for Liberty stands on this group. You may have not heard of Moms for Liberty. They may be a newerish thing to you, but think of them as a Mothers Against Drunk Driving sort of collab group, a lobbying group of mothers who get together to fight the fight that is right now sort of the woke mind virus things going on, and want to push more conservative values, or purer things, if you will, for the world, and basically save their kids from a lot of the nasty stuff out there, The co-founders have spoken out about the fact that they are being called extremists. They're being called right wing. They're being called bad for American kids when they're just trying to do things that are good for American kids. Meanwhile, many of them are being seen, and many of the chapters are essentially, which are growing like weeds, many chapters are being seen and hooking up with members of the Proud Boys and other types of actual extremist groups that people don't really have a question about being extremists. In fact, the groups are pretty proud that they're on this list, that they're extremists, while Moms for Liberty are just like, we're just white ladies who just want to do nice things. That's sort of the opening premise for this premise. So let's go to the specific thing that we're doing in this story here. The Parent Brigade newsletter is a newsletter that many of these groups put out. And the Hamilton County, Indiana newsletter, they put out one that was highlighting the Carmel High School. They received $10,000 from It Gets Better Project, the It Gets Better Project, to produce a community-wide Pride event for the Carmel Pride Festival. So that happened. They're upset, that being this group, that they got grant money from a nonprofit. And I'm pretty sure that It Gets Better is a nonprofit. They're not actually selling t-shirts to, make movies of any Hollywood sort, to support people in the gay community, the LGBTQ community. And so they gave money to a high school, a public entity, to do this. So maybe there's some beef to go along with that. But they outline their actual beef and the actual issue in their newsletter, an actual printed newsletter, like on paper, which also not necessarily a bad thing. Here's where things get really, really, really bad, really, really fast, and draw your eyeballs to what's going on and think maybe they aren't right there. Okay, so I'm going to read you from the headline. I guess it's not a printed. I guess it's a digital flyer, digital newsletter, but it looks like a printed. So here it is, June 23. The Parent Brigade, parent advocacy through unifying, educating, and empowering for parental rights at all levels of government. Okay, this issue, Liberty Lesson, a class in biblical citizenship. Okay, parents win, a legislative support HEPL policy. Okay, have you heard? Carmel Pride Festival funding grown of school choice voucher program. Okay, but what really gets people's attention is on the right side of the newsletter, where they have some of the things that, the message like Moms for Liberty will not be intimidated by hate groups. There you go. Message from the founder there. But above that message from the founder is a quote that supposedly goes along with their more or less oath and specifically with this issue. And the quote is, "He alone who owns the youth gains the future." Now, that might sound something that's kind of old school and biblical, but what it actually is, it's a quote from Adolf Hitler. Like literally Adolf Hitler, the guy with the little mustache that tried to kill all the Jews and take over Europe back in the 40s. Yes, Adolf Hitler. So with that, a big backlash came about from the Moms of Liberty quoting the Hitler quote, or using Hitler quote, to promote their newsletter, or to kind of gain attention to it, which is where everything kind of went off the rails from there. Now, you may or may not agree with some of the things that the Moms for Liberty stand for. You may or may not agree that the Moms of Liberty deserve to exist in some form, but you've got to have some sort of sense of understanding that when people say the quiet things out loud, you have to pay attention to them. Now, many of the things in this newsletter, many things I've seen in the Moms of Liberty, and they've popped up in a couple things over the past couple of months. I'm sure they've been around, probably birthed of the pandemic, so I'm sure they've been around quite some time to have enough chapters to be of meaningfulness. But this group right here, to be able to say what it has to say and do what it's going to do, to fight the good fight for parental advocacy, parent advocacy, as they say, in all levels of government, basically saying a parent should be able to tell the government what they want their kids to do. Not necessarily a bad thing. But the problem comes when the case where right now, what government's doing for children is trying to loosen laws to let them work in more dangerous places, which is a way of exploitation, and, loosen laws in a way of medical coverage, which is a way of adding into exploitation and into discrimination. I don't care how you feel about child labor laws or the trans bills going on right now or the fight against drag queens and stuff like that. That's not really the issue. And Moms for Liberty has their ability to say what they want to say. Here's something I say very often, and I say this, with all true sincerity about people who don't kind of like me and the complexion of my skin or people of my complexion. If you don't know, I'm African American. Is that I have no problem with people who are racist, who say they are racist, and will stand over there in that corner and tell me that they're racist, because I know they're over there in that corner, and I know I don't need to be over there in that corner because those people over there are racist and don't like me. I can understand that. I don't need to be someplace where somebody doesn't want me around. There are other places where I can be around where it's much more comfortable. It's the people that you don't know have it against you that are the real issue. They're the real danger. The person that you think is your ally, who's actually an enemy in disguise, is using you or trying to infiltrate to get more stuff out of you, is the issue. So Moms for Liberty being, as I will say, pretty freaking racist is not a bad thing. Because if you want to be a card-carrying member of Moms for Liberty, you got other problems to deal with. If you want to be a member of the Proud Boys and want to show folks off that you're a member of the Proud Boys, you probably have other issues to deal with. And I know I don't have to put up any time and effort to deal with you unless, utterly necessary. Maybe you work at the DMV and I have to go up to your thing. At that point in time, it doesn't matter what you are. I shouldn't know and you shouldn't care. However, when you're planning on being an advocacy group that has to, battle in the public eye, and you have to battle other people and other issues, and you have to be able to debate those issues and talk those things out and be in places where someone who doesn't believe what you believe is also fighting for, their belief. You've got to be in some semblance of, good taste, if you will. And just by showing up and saying, we want traditional values, whatever that actually means, doesn't actually put you in the right to even push those traditional values. Just because you want Bibles in school, which is not necessarily a bad thing, doesn't mean the school must be legislated by the Bible. That's kind of a problem when various other faiths exist. Maybe not as much as back in the 40s, but they do, and they have the right to exist and do what they want to. You don't see too many Hindu people trying to say, we want our Hindu values in our school. They just don't do that. Now, you do see people who claim to be Satanists and things like that who are saying, well, we want more of our stuff in schools. That's because they're trying to egg on the Christians who fall for it every time. But when you start quoting Hitler, who, if you don't understand, did a lot of bad things, sure, he built the Autobahn, but he killed 1 million Jews, they don't really equal themselves together. So if your thought process is following a person whose thought process was there was one master race and everyone should literally bow down and look at their boots, you've got a problem. You've got a serious problem. You should look yourself into the mirror and then look yourself into a picture of yourself in the mirror and then take a selfie and look at yourself at all three of those things and wonder what the hell is looking back at you, because it's not a rational human being from any standpoint that I can see. Am I going to make any enemies with the Moms of Liberty? They're probably not going to hear this. No one listens to my podcast, so trust me, this isn't going anywhere. But if they were to hear this, and if they were to pick up on this stuff, I am going to offer them a little bit of media help in this case. I'm offering them a little bit of media training in this one. Number one, don't quote Adolf Hitler. Number two, if your thought process is aligned with something that is essentially Nazi propaganda, reevaluate your thought processes. And number three, rewrite your stuff so it doesn't look like it falls in line with Nazi propaganda, especially when you use quotes from Hitler. There's that. There's a free consultation on that one. You're welcome. So what do they stand for? We're going to go to Wikipedia for this one. And whoever wrote this article, whoever actually did the editing on this article, not a fan. Headquarters in Melbourne, Florida, U.S. Founded in January 1st of 2021, so it's been around for a little bit. Moms for Liberty is an American hate group that advocates against school curriculums that mention LGBT rights, race and ethnicity, critical race theory, and discrimination. while multiple chapters have also campaigned to ban from school libraries books that address gender and sexuality. The group began by promoting disinformation and conspiracy theories about the COVID-19 pandemic by protesting COVID-19 protections in schools, including mask and vaccination mandates. The group is influential with the Republican Party. Many of the group chapters across the U.S. have forged close ties to right-wing extremist groups, including the Proud Boys and Three Percenters, mentioned those already, as well as Sovereign Citizens, QAnon, and Christian nationalist organizations. In 2023, the Southern Poverty Law Center, a civil rights organization that tracks extremists, termed Moms for Liberty a far-right extremist organization. Mentioned that as well also. Moms for Liberty has been criticized for harassment, for deepening divisions among parents, for making students' education more difficult, and for having close ties to the Republican Party. Okay, rather than being a genuine grassroots effort. The group was labeled as an anti-government extremist organization until 2002 by the Southern Poverty Law Center. That is repeated information in that thing. So you can check out the Wikipedia article for that and get some laughs, or go to other sources for who they are. But there's your start. Now, if you're a person who got this far into this podcast and you disagree, then let's have that discussion. They claim to be a grassroots organization. Okay. They claim to fight for parental rights, which is to have a say in what their kids are being told, taught, and shown in government or public entities. That's okay. Schools, public schools, they don't want bad things their kids shouldn't see. Okay. General areas in government, they don't want bad things their kids should see. Okay. Problem number one with that, and it really pains me to say this as a Christian who am, pretty proud of my Christian values and how it shapes my way and how it shapes the way of my family and how I am with my own kids. When you bundle up everything you believe in a sort of a extremist Christian fundamental value, which I will quote as kind of a overly white, I should be in power type of thought process, you miss the point. There are things out there that you need to see and need to understand and need to take in your youth, sometimes a little younger than you think, but in your youth, that are going to exist. And as you make your way through them in your youth, you find a way to deal with them and have a better and more just level-headed view of them as you get older. Bring up Michael Smerconish, which I tend to do a lot because I listen to him and actually sort of model my radio, non-radio career after things that he has done or is doing. One day in the past week, they had a segment on with a person who wrote his doctorate thesis on the fact that the good old days don't even exist. Good old days is essentially a mindset that people believe in, when in actuality, the times they live in are much more better, not exactly grammatically correct, but they believe that some of the things in the past and the values that, you think you thought in the past were a better time, even though times are obviously better with technology and things like that. One of the callers that called in claimed to be, or basically identified himself as a preacher's kid who grew up in a shelter environment because he was a preacher's kid inside of a fundamentalist type thought process in that culture, in that church. And with that, he learned once he got out of that specter, out of that circle of being, under the thumb of the preacher's kid and doing all the church stuff, he met a lot more people that were different from him. And he actually had a chance to understand all the boogeymen that were sort of shouted out at his church weren't exactly the boogeyman he thought. Yes, bad things do happen in various ways, but not because of what he was taught. Most people are better than you think they are. But yearning back to a time when people, didn't have to lock their doors at night because they weren't afraid of stuff. That was a image that essentially was created by television and the media at the time, wanting you to believe this was it. The life of Leave It to Beaver was not the life of my ancestors back then because, they didn't have that going on. And that's kind of the problem. When you live in your bubble and you don't let people come to and touch your bubble, you have issues. You can live in your bubble, and you can see people outside, and you can say, see, look at that and what's going on. That's fine. But when you do what you can to cover the eyes of everyone inside of the bubble and not let anyone in, it becomes an issue. You may not like LGBTQ people. That is your right. That is not fine. That is your right. You don't have the right to bug them, throw things at them, keep them away from public things because they have every right as well. You may not be a fan of some of these stories, I'll call them stories just for the sake of this argument, that says that certain people did certain bad things to certain other people as a whole in the past. You may not like hearing that. Guess what? It kind of happened. And you should probably know about it, because if you know about it, you can empathize with what's going on, and you can also do what you can to not do the same thing in this newer, better, greater time where you may not have me with a chain around my leg digging in the cotton fields, but you can, use your power and means to pick up a phone and say I'm doing something weird out in public and have me arrested because I have of that complexion. So there's that. Moms for Liberty sounds like a really, really, really bad group of people in the organization part. The people itself, like the folks that get sucked into QAnon and everything else, so many people, once they realize that they're in a cult because they need some support, they need some love, they need some attention, and these people seem to want to give them attention and seem to want to help them out and need a little assistance in helping the world be a better place, aren't actually making the world a better place. They are making it worse. And believe it or not, there are people behind the scenes who are making it worse on purpose because it's more politically and economically good for the worst to happen. And if for some reason, the dog catches the car and, things happen to their positive, and it's the now what scenario, they find something else to be scared of. Moms of Liberty, per my opinion, are bad people as an organization. As individual people, I hope they can find some way to understand what's going on. Trust me, I'm not the person who's going to change anyone's mind on this case, but maybe if I do, I would love to have a conversation with a person who believes this. And even if they do believe this, I'd just love to have a conversation with them just one-on-one, just going into the details of why to do this and let them hear what I have to say about it. And we agree to disagree and just have a nice brunch. Although I'm not a fan of avocado. So as long as there's no avocado there, that's fine. But we should be able to talk these things out, even if we're on different sides. Although I am extremely hesitant to talk things out when literally the top of their conversation, they take the opening move of tossing out quotes from Hitler, which, as anyone should have figured out by now, unless you're extremely, extremely racist and you're with people who are extremely, extremely racist, Hitler quotes don't work out so well with the public. That has been the story of the week for this week ending June 24th, 2023. As I said, maybe not the most important story that was out there. Of course, this was the week that the Titan submersible went underwater, and we spent 4 days looking for it, only to find out it imploded pretty much early on into the mission. That was a much more important story. And yes, the Juneteenth shootings were also really big. And most of the top 10 stories were pretty important, even if they weren't as sensational and popular as some other ones. But this is one that caught my attention. And as I said, as I looked through the list and wore them down, this is one that has a bit of a more rippling effect if you're in a state or a state of mind where you're dealing with sort of these backlashes of culture right now, because they are backlashes of culture. They're not real culture issues. They're mostly made up. You can disagree with either side of the issue, but the tactics being used, especially by folks like Moms of Liberty, are horrible. If you want to comment to that to me, email the shows, that's for the Conversation Project, at theconversationinbox@gmail.com, or me directly at jclevelandpayne@gmail.com. Go to our website. This is theconversationproject.com for more details on all the things we offer, including the weekly wrap-up podcast, which is the supplement to the supplement. And of course, see us every single morning, or watch us in the video replays, or listen to podcasts for things you might have heard from Monday through Friday, every single weekday morning, and other offerings we have throughout the way. Stop by our sponsors page or our partnerships page and see if there's a way you want to join up with us and help us out if you think we're doing good stuff. And if you don't think we're doing good stuff, comment. Let's have let's have that brunch. Let's, have a beer, have a wine, have a champagne, whatever your poison is. And let's talk about some stuff as opposed to shouting at each other, because that's the real problem. Too much shouting. At the end of all my programs, I say stay hydrated, stay limber, and stay on task, because life is a very, very long journey if you play it well and you're going to make sure that you are in the best shape and best mental capacity and hydrated so you don't pass out in key moments going forward. So take care of yourself and just stick around. So what story will we talk about for the week next week? We'll first find out when we count down the top 10 stories from the weekly wrap up. And then from there, we'll find out which story, catches my attention and which story we'll give a little extra time to in the Story of the Week podcast from the Conversation Project. Thank you so much for being here for us this week. Let's do this again next week.